Missing persons cases are always the most challenging and frustrating for law enforcement, as they obviously want to locate the person, preferably alive and well. But if nothing else, they hope to at least provide a sense of closure to families in turmoil. In some cases, though, while a physical body can be produced, what if no one comes to identify it or to claim it, and the case remains unresolved? Now let's imagine that scenario and almost 50 years have passed. This next story is about one of the most baffling and bizarre cold cases in American history, and one that, at this point in time at least, seems destined to go unresolved. This is extremely strange. It's July 26, 1974, and the Metcalf family and some friends are taking a walk at the Race Point Dunes in Provincetown, Mass. On Cape Cod. Along for the outing is their 12-year-old daughter Leslie, as well as their friend's dog. The animal suddenly becomes very energized by something in the tall pines along the path and breaks off to do some exploring. When the dog begins to bark, young Leslie runs to it to see what had attracted its attention. What she saw would be something all too gruesome for anyone to encounter, let alone a child. At first inspection, the young girl assumed it was perhaps a dead deer carcass, but she soon realized that it was the body of a woman, face down, completely naked, with both hands removed and her clothing folded neatly underneath her. She ran back to her parents to tell of what she had just found, and after her father went to the spot to confirm her horrific find, he immediately contacted the park rangers to report it. Police were immediately summoned to the scene and found the as yet unidentified woman lying on a green beach towel with a pair of jeans and a bandana placed under her head as if to create some sort of pillow for her. Her hands and one forearm had definitely been removed, and closer examination showed that she had been almost decapitated, possibly by a garrote used to strangle her, and that some of her teeth had been removed. It was quickly assumed the absence of her hands, forearm, and teeth were cunningly removed to conceal her identity from forensic examiners. There was a clear indication of blunt force trauma to the head, possibly from a military entrenching tool, which was ruled the cause of death, and there were also signs of sexual assault post-mortem. Toxicology tests revealed no blood or drugs were found in her system. There were also a set of tire tracks approximately 15 feet from the body and 2 sets of footprints leading away from it. Time of death was placed anywhere from 10 days to 3 weeks. Early in the forensic examination, pathologists noticed that the woman had previously had some high-end dental work done, literally thousands of dollars worth. It was done in what experts would label New York style, which signaled a higher quality of work. She was estimated to be between 25 and 40 years of age, approximately 5 feet 6 inches tall, auburn-colored hair pulled back into a ponytail with an athletic build. Her toenails had been painted pink. It was speculated she may have been asleep at the time of the attack, as there were no signs of a struggle, which also suggested she may have known her killer or killers. Because blood was found elsewhere in the area, but not at the murder scene, it was surmised she was likely killed elsewhere and then, for all intents and purposes, posed at the crime scene. Lacking any identification found on the body, fingerprints, or enough to search dental records, identifying the body would prove difficult. Missing persons reports were searched, and dentists were consulted to establish if there was any sort of trademark of the work done on her. A search for the vehicle that left tire marks, which included identifying owners of every deserted bicycle or vehicle in the area, and every vehicle which had legally been driven out on the dunes in the weeks prior to the discovery, led to no suspects, and multiple combings of the area yielded nothing in the form of clues as to the woman's identity or the perpetrators. The first clay facial recreation of the victim based on a scan of her skull, was made in 1979, with many variations submitted in the years to follow. These wide range of facial recreations may actually be hindering the investigation, as many artists seem to take on their own impression of what the woman looked like, instead of a more focused version based on, let's say, bone structure. Who became known as the Lady of the Dunes lies at the St. Peter's Cemetery, except for her head, which law enforcement kept for the still ongoing criminal investigation, and at one point was displayed on the desk of the police chief as a grim reminder of a case gone unsolved. Now, since the discovery of the Lady of the Dunes some 48 years ago, no one has come forward to identify the body or claim responsibility for the killing. And like many unsolved or unexplained incidents, oftentimes theories and speculation are all that are offered when the truth remains elusive. But that doesn't mean that some people haven't offered some very tantalizing leads. Public appeals were made, with one woman from Maryland claiming her sister, who also had auburn hair, had gone missing after she had moved back home to Boston. Nothing ever materialized from that lead, or the literally thousands that came in, with perhaps only 50 or so being deemed even worthy of a follow-up. A prisoner being held in Maine who kept drawing women with their hands missing was questioned and eventually dismissed as a subject. A psychic claimed that the victim's hands could be found under the foundation of a particular building, but by the time police arrived there, they found the cellar had been dug up the previous year. An immediate suspect was a notorious serial killer named Tony Costa, who was thought to have murdered and dismembered at least 5 Cape Cod area women in 1969. He was eliminated as the killer when it was noted that Costa hung himself in his cell in May of 1974, as the Dune murder took place in July of that year. In 1987, a Canadian woman told police that as a 5-year-old, she had witnessed her father strangle a woman while visiting Providence, Rhode Island in 1974. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police relayed this to Massachusetts police, but by the time police tried to track down the woman, they found she had moved away and her current whereabouts remain unknown. One person that originally moved the needle for authorities was a woman named Rory Jean Kessinger, a drug and gun runner and bank robber who escaped from jail using a smuggled-in hacksaw in 1973. She bore a strong resemblance to the victim, but with her last whereabouts unknown, to this day actually, a DNA sample was taken from her mother, which resulted in not being a match for the Dunes victim. One other prominent theory involving a known criminal posits that the woman was killed by notorious Boston mob boss James Whitey Bulger, who frequented the area, and especially the Crown and Anchor in Provincetown, where he engaged in drug and weapons deals. The condition of the victim's body mirrored that of another alleged Bulger victim, Debbie Davis, whose body, like the Lady of the Dunes, showed up near water at a marshy area near the Neponset River in 2000. She had been strangled with her teeth removed. She was apparently the girlfriend of Bulger associate Stephen the Rifleman Flemmy, and had come to know that both men were being used as FBI informants. Fearing her disclosing this to anyone, she was killed in 1981, and it was 19 years before her body was found. Fueling the speculation about Bulger as the killer was the pair of size 10 footprints that were found near the body, which was the size shoe that Bulger wore. Also, the green blanket she was found laying on was said to resemble that which is used at the Crown and Anchor. To give you an idea of the mindset of people like Bulger and Flemmy, Flemmy told police that he was frustrated that only the negative aspect of Davis' murder was being emphasized. After all, on her last day on Earth, just before she was led to her death, she was treated to a shopping spree at a local mall. So hey, they showed her a good time before they murdered her in cold blood, right? Now, who said killers didn't have kind hearts? Keeping with the theme of known killers as suspects, In 2000, convicted cannibal/cross-dresser Hayden Clark confessed to killing the Lady of the Dunes while serving 2 concurrent 30-year sentences for killing a 6-year-old girl and 23-year-old woman. He also copped to somewhere around 12 killings between the 1970s and 1990s, with some victims being buried on his grandparents' property on Block Island, Rhode Island. Clark claimed, "I could have told police what her name was, but after they beat the shit out of me, I wasn't going to tell them shit." This murder is still unsolved, and what the police are looking for is in my grandfather's garden. He was placed in the area at the time of the Dune killing, and police, acting on that information, conducted a search of the Block Island property, which produced no human remains, but did result in the discovery of hundreds of pieces of jewelry taken from his victims. Unfortunately, no hard evidence links Clark's to the crime, and he suffers from paranoid schizophrenia, which blurs the lines between reality and fantasy, making it difficult to sort out if anything he admits to doing is actually true. There's a couple of other oddball angles to address, one that has connections not only to the literary world, but to one of Hollywood's most iconic films. Crime author Sandra Lee claims it was actually her who stumbled across the lifeless body of the unknown woman on the very same day that young Leslie Metcalf did. As a 9-year-old, she was camping there with her family and, like Leslie, was walking a dog when she came across the gruesome scene. She claims to have been so shaken and frightened that she didn't report what she saw to anyone. She went on to write a book, The Shanty, based on the case. She also supports the idea that Whitey Bulger was indeed the killer, as her then stepfather was an associate of the mobster, whom she remembered as Uncle Jimmy, and who she says was very nice to her. She also points to the similarities in the Debbie Davis murder as a sort of modus operandi in eliminating someone without leaving clues as to their identity for police to find. Bulger was never proven to be the killer, and when finally captured in Santa Monica, California in 2013, he was beaten to death by multiple inmates at United States Penitentiary Hazleton in West Virginia in 2018 at the age of 89. Then there is the theory put forth by the son of America's most prolific horror writer. Stephen King's son, Joe Hill, put forth an intriguing, if far-fetched, notion in 2015. After watching an episode of Haunting Evidence, which involved the Lady of the Dunes investigation, he became interested in the case. Then, while watching the classic film Jaws, something caught his eye just past the 54-minute mark of the film. A female extra, wearing jeans and a blue bandana, was seen in the camera shot walking amongst a host of other extras in the movie. Based on the sketches he had seen of the unidentified woman, he noticed what actually is a strong resemblance to the victim. As Jaws was filmed on Martha's Vineyard, only 100 miles or so away from Cape Cod, it wasn't out of the realm of possibility that someone might simply, out of curiosity, wander onto the set unnoticed. He found it quite ironic that perhaps a woman who no one can identify may have actually been seen by millions of people without realizing who she actually was. Though Hill clearly understood this was at best a wild theory, and possibly as a writer himself the product of a vivid imagination, he nonetheless spoke to an FBI agent about it. The agent replied to him saying that odder things have cracked colder cases. In fact, lead detectives, with little else to go on, pursued this angle by checking the studio call sheet to get the names of all extras in the movie in hopes that, by throwing up a Hail Mary, it would solve what had been a maddening mystery. Unfortunately, in a movie that was famous for chaos and commotion, it proved to be an impossible task, as no records of extras still exist, and the casting director for the movie has since passed away. Now, as it stands, there were at least 6 female extras who wore blue bandanas in the movie, and the style of jeans worn by the woman in the clip don't match the Wrangler brand that were found near the victim's body. But the notion that bringing this to light could possibly jog someone's memory, or if nothing else regenerate interest in the case, was worth the effort. The Lady of the Dunes body has been exhumed no less than 3 times in an attempt to identify her. First in 1980, so that blood samples could be taken in an attempt to find a match that proved unsuccessful. Again in 2000, the body was exhumed to extract DNA that could be forwarded to several missing person databases, but still no confirmation has been forthcoming. Then in 2013, that process was repeated. In 2010, experts from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and the Smithsonian Institution created a new facial reconstruction image based on a new high-tech scan of her skull. And by 2014, one of the investigators looking into the case raised funds to replace her old casket because of the deteriorating state of the original. Investigators have far from given up hopes of discovering her true identity. In 2019, Michael O'Keefe, District Attorney for the Cape and Islands, reopened the investigation. It's hoped that the use of something called genetic genealogy, which is a method used by investigators to employ genetic databases to find family members of a perpetrator or victim, may finally solve the case. This method assisted detectives in California to uncover suspects involved in 28 cases in 2018, including Joseph James DeAngelo, the Golden State Killer, after a nearly 50-year search. Almost 50 years later, the identity of the woman found in the dunes in 1974 remains unresolved. It remains the oldest case of an unidentified deceased person in the state of Massachusetts, and the pall that it created lingers over the otherwise vibrant, eclectic, and beautiful town of Provincetown, Massachusetts. And sadly, Leslie Metcalf, the little girl who came upon the body, suffered her own tragedy when in 1996 she died of a heroin overdose. Perhaps someday someone will come forward to identify the body or claim responsibility for her killing, but until then, the Lady of the Dunes case remains one of the great unsolved mysteries.